A potential topic that's been coming up from some suggestions here is to possibly do some online courses on game design and game development. And if anyone here, or if you guys think that would be a good idea, let me know in the comments below. But it made me think about today's topic as part of a discussion we've been having on Discord about how to get started when it comes to game development. And for today, we're going to kind of go back to basics once again and discuss what should you do once you have an idea in your head, or even just a simple prototype that you already have built. As anybody knows, game development is of course incredibly easy to do, and most people can get it figured out within a day to finish a completed title? But for us in the real world, game development is very hard to do, and it's very tricky when it comes to starting out. Be it your first game, or your first title that you want to kind of develop or take this idea further. And while many people will just say, look at what Nintendo did, because as we all know, if you just follow Nintendo, your game will be a multi-million-dollar success. But as you're beginning when it comes to being in the game industry, there are several things you need to understand about taking that step from a prototype or an idea to a product. And that's the point of our video today. And those of you watching this right now, you need to have an idea. This is not the video that's going to give you an idea, and that's very important because a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today, it has to come from you. Nobody is going to tell you what your gameplay is. Nobody's going to tell you what game to design. Unless, of course, you're working at a major company and they're the one who is fitting the bill. But for many first-time developers, this can be a very arduous task about where do we begin? Because just as there are as many genres out there, there are as many ways of designing games. And it can be, again, that unlimited potential can be very daunting and just very much like a deer in the headlights moment for a lot of people. So, to begin with, the very first thing that you need as a developer is your core gameplay loop. What is the major mechanic or system in your title? What is the primary verb that people are going to be using in your game? And again, this can be anything. You want a match 3 game of zombies? Do you want space sim monkeys piloting robotic banana mechs? Do you want a horror My Little Pony crossover? Whatever the heck you want, you can do that. But you have to be able to figure this out on your own. And again, this is not a genre. Saying first-person shooter, that's not a core gameplay loop. Neither is racing or real-time strategy. If we talk about jumping around in a first-person space, grappling around walls, okay, that's a little bit better. Jumping on platforms and, avoiding obstacles, okay, that's a good one as well. But the point is, you need a foundation, because nothing else is going to matter before you have that. Asking people for advice on what to build or what you're doing before you have a core gameplay loop would be akin to going into a furniture or a home repair place and saying, I need to pick out furniture and paint for my house, except I have no house, it hasn't been built yet, and nobody's even made a blueprint for it. And again, this is all going to be on you. You're the one who has to figure this out. And this first step can certainly be a stopping point for a lot of developers, because taking that step from dream idea up here into a code or something on a computer is very daunting. And again, it's why this is such a challenge when it comes to game design. So let's say that you have a game idea. You have that core gameplay loop. You've put things together. You may even have a simple prototype. Now what do you do? The next thing, of course, you need to find the fun. You need to figure out what are the hooks of your game. What is going to convince me all the fans, random people on the internet, on Steam, GOG, itch, whatever, what's going to convince them to play your game? And one of the easiest mistakes to fall into right here is saying, it's a video game. That's not good enough today. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of video games being released weekly. Right now I'm recording this, I'm going to be getting ready for my Indie Dev Spotlight stream, where I'm going to be playing a good 10 to 20 indie games at night. So why should I play yours and not any of those other ones? And unfortunately, we see a lot of novice developers fall into this trap of saying, well, I'm making it, so that should be reason enough. Or this game will star, this will be the only game that has a female protagonist, or male protagonist, or it's going to be an emotionally gripping story. Unfortunately, those are marketing points. They're not hooks. Why do you think I should play your game? Is it because the gameplay is unique? Is it an interesting case of something fantastic? Is it something I've never seen before? But you have to answer this. And again, nobody is going to tell you why they should play your game. And this is, again, why so much of game development, or more specifically, successful game development, is about wearing many hats. You have to be the business person as much as you have to be the artist. And you have to be able to look objectively at your game and say, okay, this part is really great. This is amazing. I love to do this. I need to tell people about this. And this is something that we see from a lot of developers who do end up making it. That they play their game and they start to put things together when they find that fun. Whether that fun could be hooking around a map, it could be building an army in a tactical strategy game or a strategy RPG, it could be just punching a bullet in Ultra Kill. The point is, these games know what they want to be as soon as possible. And again, this wraparounds back to the core gameplay loop. Because once you know what your core gameplay loop is, you can start to figure out why people should play your game. And once again, that goes back to the core gameplay. And again, when we talk about game development, a lot of this is not only in the implementation, but in the organization and being prepared for your design. You shouldn't be going to people saying, I have this amazing idea for a game, you jump around and shoot, now why don't you build me the entire game out of that? This is why a lot of people will say they don't like idea people when it comes to the game industry. Because most ideas are the most surface level basic ideas. I have a multi-million idea for a horror game. You run around a house being chased by zombies. Give me $500,000. And again, we saw, unfortunately, developers fall into that during the kind of the Kickstarter bust for game development. Just saying that you have an idea, or wouldn't it be awesome if we did this, is not grounds or is not enough to justify making a video game. When you go to somebody, you need to be able to explain to them what this game is and why should I play it. What makes this game unique or special, or what, again, like we said, are the hooks. And sometimes you can get away with not having like a specific market. Like if you're going to be building the first visual novel RPG first-person shooter kart racer, okay, that's going to be a little bit hard to describe. You can get by on uniqueness alone. But you still need to be able to explain to somebody what this game is. Because I've seen games from developers who think that they are going outside the box and doing something never before seen that's going to completely revolutionize how we play video games. And we end up with a jumbled mess of mechanics, very little in terms of onboarding and approachability, and anything that could be considered good or amazing is being buried by those concepts. And again, what we're talking about is taking that step from a hobbyist into a game developer. If you're not interested in selling your game, you are just making stuff either for portfolio or for art or just in your spare time, do not listen to me in this video because that's not what we're talking about here. And that is a very hard answer for a lot of people because most of you who are watching this, you don't have the next 3 to 5 years of your life planned out how this game is going to be sketched out. And this is why these kinds of discussions are very hard to have. Because coming up with these systems and the mechanics, and then figuring out where you want to take them, you're basically, again, going back to the house analogy, you're building the house at the same time you're defining and building the blueprint. And this can be very difficult when you're starting out, just not sure what you can do and how can you do this? So let's say you have the idea down, you know what hooks you want to do with it. Where do you go from there? Well, I think that is an effective hook that we'll be discussing after this quick break. And now for a quick thank you to our current Game Wisdom supporters and sponsors. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. Now available at most retailers are my current books on design. 20 Essential Games to Study is an intro-level look at 20 unique games to provide inspiration for any developer looking to get into the game industry. And the Game Design Deep Dive series each go into a top-to-bottom look at the design of a specific genre, with platformers and roguelikes now available, and horror coming in the near future. As we've said, kind of half the battle when it comes to this kind of game development is figuring out what you want your game to be in the first place, knowing what your core gameplay loop is. And once you've gotten that figured out, now comes the next tricky part. Where do you go with that knowledge? And the first thing that you need to do is you want to get yourself a prototype. Get it completed as quickly as you can. Now again, for those of you who aren't familiar, when we're talking about a prototype here, we are talking about your raw mechanics on computer. We don't care about art, we don't care about aesthetics, sound, if it looks like anything halfway decent. We just want to get the mechanics available to play. And the reason why you need to do this is that once you've gotten that core gameplay loop settled, you need to figure out the next big question. Is this even good? And I know that sounds very mean to say, especially any new developers watching this. But just because you have a game idea doesn't mean it's a good one. And what we've seen from a lot of developers who tend to start out and end up failing is that they will dedicate a lot of time and a lot of their money to an idea and learn far too late that maybe this was not the best idea to make. Whether it's not the best idea because it's my first game, or if it's not just a good idea for a game concept, or a marketable one. And getting a prototype up early allows you to start seeing how these things actually work. Because there is a difference between a video game idea in your head and one on your computer. I know that's a very shocking revelation there. When you are looking, or once you have your prototype built, you now come to my favorite word lately, and that is playtesting. You need to get this in the hands of people. And when we say people, we don't mean your friends and family. You need to show this to people who can give you an objective look at your game. And one of the misconceptions about this is the ever popular, well, if I show my idea to someone, they're going to steal it. And that is not true. Again, what we have seen time and time again is that execution is king when it comes to these games. If you have the same idea, but whoever gets it done properly first will be the more superior game. It's what we've seen with Fortnite. It's what we've seen with the slew of games that have tried to copy stuff like Stardew Valley, FTL, and so on. And the reason why certain games do succeed or get very well in terms of player perception is that they are polished and refined experiences. And the only way you're going to get that is by letting people check it out. At this stage of the game, again, you are looking to see if your game is enjoyable. And what we mean is that with no aesthetics, no art, no sound, just essentially, your mechanics represented by squares or circles, wherever art you can find on the internet, are people enjoying the gameplay? Now again, this is not the time for consumers to look at your game. You do not want to put a game like this, or put a game in this state on early access, and say, okay, give me money for it. This is not the time for consumers to be checking out your game. And I have another video that I'm working on now talking about more on early access. And we will be discussing that at a later point. But for this moment, when you have your prototype done, you are trying to get opinions about your gameplay. And yes, I'm sure there will be people who will say, well, your game doesn't look good. Again, feedback is always going to be a challenge for you. But what you're trying to figure out right now is whether or not this idea has merit. And like we said, if people can play this version of your game and enjoy it without anything getting in the way, then you have something. And if people are just hating it, if this idea is just not coming together for you, then it may be time to pull the plug on it. And it's better to pull the plug on a prototype than a game that is 70% through development. And again, this is often why when we talk to developers, one of the major tips we get is that you need to be able to fail small. And there's no shame in canceling a prototype. It may be hard for first-time developers who have their first big idea and it's just not working, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you are putting out the very best game idea that you can. And from there, you want to be able to polish and refine these ideas. And this is where our footage that's showing up here comes into play. This is from Vision Soft Reset, a game that we spoke to the developer about. I think this was like early 2019. And when we had him on, I really enjoyed Vision Soft Reset. It was one of my favorite games of the year. And when he discussed designing the game, he basically said everything that I wanted to hear in terms of how he came up with these ideas. That the general mechanics for Vision Soft Reset were figured out very early in the game's development. This is not a concept that he went through, 20 different revisions and completely rewrote his entire game 5 times to make. And oftentimes, the games that end up succeeding, or at least doing well from a game development standpoint, are the ones that the core gameplay loop is figured out early, the general concepts are being enjoyed, and it's just a matter of expanding and iterating on that. While this is not going to be quote-unquote easy development, it's going to make things a lot simpler for you to know that the foundation of your game works, that people enjoy it. And like we've said, there's often this case of developers just going into cave mode, where they will not look at anything from the outside while they're developing their game. They'll never show it to anyone, and then they're going to be surprised, well, why does anyone like my game? And you have to be very careful, again, about being able to accept feedback from people. Because yes, we know that the prototype can be your baby, but if everyone that you show your baby to doesn't like it, then trying to dress it up more or trying to improve it may be a fool's errand. And like we've said, we've seen developers who will chase a game idea. They will put all their time and attention on a singular idea, even if people aren't enjoying it, and try to kind of brute force this idea to work. And what we've seen is that these games just do not end up coming out well or being well received. Maybe the game will never even be finished, or the version that we get is just something that is essentially just for the developer only. It's so obtuse, or the design is just not there, that the only way you're going to enjoy or appreciate it is if you were the one who made it. And like we've said, there is definitely pride in having a finished game, and nobody can take that away from you. But if you are trying to succeed in this industry, especially in today's market, you have to do everything you can to mitigate those risks. And if that means either putting aside or scrapping your dream idea, then sometimes you have to make that decision. And like we've said, you can certainly come back to an idea with more experience or with a better team. But when you are starting out, you want to be able to make something that you can actually make. And what I mean by that is that there's often a difference between the game that you want to make and the game that you can make. And it's easy for developers to fall into that trap of, I will just make this perfect game that is everything and anything, and it'll be a multi-billion-dollar idea, it'll be game of the year, and I can retire. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. And it's better when you are starting out to, again, start small. Get something that you can enjoy playing at its most basic level. Because again, if people love this idea now, then you are already kind of a quarter or halfway, through the difficulty of getting this game going. Because again, it's easy to keep on kind of going through core gameplay loops. And again, whenever you do that, you are essentially restarting your game's design, because the core gameplay loop affects all. And if you're not careful, you can end up in the situation where you are just chasing what you want your core gameplay loop to be after months or even years of development. The core gameplay loop of your game should not only be figured out early, but it should be figured out before anything else. And ideally, it shouldn't be taking you years or even months. You should be able to figure this out very early into your game. And again, this is what the prototype is for. That you want to be able to show people what your primary gameplay system is and see if they enjoy it or not. And one final comment before we wrap things up. I'm sure somebody's going to try and leave a comment and say, well, it's impossible to tell if my game is good now. And unfortunately, that is not true. What we have seen is that if your early concept of a game, before anything else has been developed, is enjoyable, then you are in a great position. With Vision Software said here, like we've said, he knew very early on what he wanted this game to be. And from there, it was just polish and iterating on that concept. And like we said, the best video games don't go through this mystery quest of trying to figure out what their game is for years on end. Oftentimes the games that do end up like that are the ones that fail. So with all that said, my final question for those of you watching this. Have you worked on prototypes before? And when did you show it off to people? And more importantly, for those of you who have released a game watching this, when did you figure out that you had something? That this idea that you're working on has merit, and it's worth it to see it being developed. Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out our Discord and Patreon link down below. If you have any topics that you would like me to cover in future videos, please get in touch and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, take care. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.